live with our brand new equipment. And Nick, I need to know, can you hear me on this
Hold
freaking
on.
new equipment that's taken us so long to freaking figure out?
Yeah. Yes, I can definitely hear you, but you stole my joke because I just said it in the first one we started and it didn't work out.
It didn't
and now
work.
You're stealing
And
it.
we had to stop and restart. And I just wanted to get the joke out of the way.
See, that's the challenges of working with your brother, man. He just steals your stuff.
For anyone just listening to us now, they don't even realize that that's supposed to be a funny joke. all they heard was, Nick, can you freaking hear me?
I couldn't believe how many people commented to me saying, I love it at the beginning when Tom asks if he can hear you. I'm like, really? I just really don't like that part at all.
Yeah, because everybody knows you're annoyed when I ask you that question, and it brings joy. When an older brother can annoy a younger brother, it automatically brings joy, and those people listening are probably older siblings that can appreciate that joy.
Yeah, that I can see for sure.
So listen, the idea with this particular episode is we have a lot of people that we run into who want to quit their jobs and start a side hustle of some sort of business or a full-on business. They want to quit and replace their entire income with a full-on business. So we're going to share some of the concepts that have been most instrumental in our own thinking and helped us the most. There's no way we can get through this whole thing. If you're watching on video here, we have this whole blueprint that we've kind of mapped out over the years where we've cherry-picked our favorite information and put it for ourselves in one little document. But I think we'll go through it, and hopefully this gives you a sense of what has helped us, and maybe it'll also help you. Cool? So Nick, I wanted to start with number 8 on the list, which I know.
Beginning with the end in mind.
Yeah. I want to start with number 8 because that had the biggest impact. So when we were going to quit our jobs, this had the biggest impact. It's know your business math, but not from a business planning point of view. It's how much will it cost you in your new business to get someone to raise their hands and somehow identify themselves as somewhat interested in doing business with you. And we call that a lead. How much is it going to cost to get that done? Never mind how, because Nick, we haven't even talked about lead magnets and the whole way, but how much is it going to cost you to get somebody in your world through advertising, word of mouth, referrals, whatever, to raise their hand and not do business with you, but identify that I'm a possible customer of yours? How much does that cost? And then after that, how many people have to raise their hands and identify themselves as potential customers to get a customer? And then what is the cost to do that?
So I'll stop you there for a second, because in today's world, a lot of people are going to say, well, I'll just advertise on social media, so the cost is really nothing, right? And then the one thing that you have to consider if you're starting out, that's great. You can absolutely do that. However, typically in most environments, that is a slower way to generate leads versus some sort of paid advertising. So if you're going to take that approach, great. But then how long, if what, you were saying the number of leads they need to get a customer. So if you need 100 leads, if you're only doing it through organic social media posts, how many of those leads do you need, and how long is it going to take you to get there? Because if you're starting a business, you're like, no problem, you can generate free leads. You need 100, and you can get 100 every week from social media, right? Which isn't the easiest task, especially when you're starting a business with a new social media account. Unless you can get 100 every week with social media, that's great, but that's only one customer a week. Is that enough really for your business, right?
And it brings up so many other questions, because if you don't have systems to track that stuff, how do you even know? Mm-hmm. Because if you're just doing stuff on social media and then directing people to your website, which has a phone number on it or a contact us form to reach out to you, how do you even know how many leads you're getting?
You're right.
So that'll get it. We'll get to the systems, but this is the math that made us think more like business people, like proper business people, because we started to break down the functions that were required to create a business. So it was the cost to get a lead, the number of leads to get a customer, the cost per customer. So as an example, if it was $10 to get a lead, and Nick, how many did you say? Let's say you need.
I was just using 100 as round math. So you can use 50 or whatever you want.
So no, 100. So that's $1,000 of leads. So if it's $10 to get one person through social media, paid advertising, to raise their hands and identify themselves in some capacity as interested in your business, and you need 100 of those people to do that to get a new customer.
100 is probably, if we're talking about, like, let's say someone's selling like online makeup, and
That's
you need to click, and
less.
you're advertising products, and they're clicking into your shopping cart or to the product. So let's use 50 to make it, just a better number, or whatever else you want.
Sure. Okay. So it's 50. So then it's $500 to get a customer. So that's really, really valuable information to us as a business owner and operator, because if we know that it costs us $500 to get every customer, we know we have to sell something. I'm not even talking about profit at this point. I'm just generalizing here that we have to sell something of at least $500 to have any kind of,
if we want to break even.
if we want to break even. And I'm not taking into now operating costs. I'm not taking into account lifetime value of a customer.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make it simple.
Yeah. And so this is a little bit more advanced than someone just getting started, to be fair, right? Because
But this is the kind of thinking.
You got to think about it, but you can't worry about all this stuff. Sometimes you just got to kind of put your nose to the ground and get going,
Generate
and then
business.
you figure it out. Because I was going to use the example of like, look, this is how a lot of companies work. So if you look at usually the front page of grocery store flyers, when those sales every week, those are usually loss leaders. So meaning they use this approach. Well, they're not making profit on those, but they're trying to get you into the store to worry about what else you might spend, or to get you into the habit of going to that store to spend more money to get to your next point about the lifetime value. So a lot of businesses are built this way, where you're not actually making profit on the first sale. But I think maybe there's a lot of businesses that aren't, where you can break even or make a small profit on the first sale. And it might not be life-changing, but that's where we get to the next point that's more important.
Yeah, so it's an advanced concept. So maybe when you're starting out, you just be aware of this stuff, but you don't have to lose sleep over it.
I think where you got to be aware of it, which is valuable. So, let's use let's use a gym as an example. So let's use what is it? Good Life, right? Good Life fitness clubs. So I don't know what a membership is there now, but I think at one point those types of gyms, the membership was roughly about $50 a month or something like that.
$50.
Yeah. So think about that. Like to get someone's attention, to get someone then to advertise, plus the cost of the staff and the gym and stuff like that, the $50 a month is no good to them. Like I said, they don't build the business off the $50 that you spend as a customer when you enroll, or even maybe there's an enrollment fee of $100 or $200. That's not how they're building the business. But they're thinking about that $50 a month, and then they're extrapolating it out for how long people will stay. So if you're a new gym owner and you're going to start opening a gym, you got to figure this out, and you're only selling memberships at $50 a month. Well, how hard is it to sell something at $50 a month versus can you maybe structure the business in a certain way where then you can sell things at $150 a month, or a one-time fee of $150, and that changes your business numbers dramatically all of a sudden. So when someone goes to selling things online, or people, even there's Amazon businesses, everything, how much work or profit is there in selling a $10 product versus a $50 product? And that's where you want to try to start thinking about those concepts, because maybe the business idea you have is great and there's a real need for that, but the numbers behind the business don't make sense in the way that you would naturally structure them if you're just trying to compete on price. If that makes, I don't know if I'm trying to simplify it. I don't know if I'm complicating it even more.
No, I think we're doing it. And the other thing, I guess, then to think about on top of all this is a concept that you just alluded to, was the lifetime value of a customer, because the Longos people or the Loblaws people who are doing a loss leader in the flyer, or the gym, if they're overspending, if they're not making the profit on the first purchase of a new customer, they're hoping that when somebody comes into their store and spends time with them over the next year, that's going to turn into a profitable relationship.
The repeat sales. Yeah, 100%.
The repeat sales, which is often discounted, I feel, with people who are starting a new business. They'll just calculate the profit on the first transaction. And if it's not profitable enough, they'll discount the whole business idea, which I think is a big point. They 100%. Don't understand that essentially your first sale is to acquire the new customer. Then hopefully you're good enough where you're going to get repeat sales, and the cost of acquisition of that customer is now gone because you have them.
Yeah.
They know about you.
And that, I feel, is where the real profit is in businesses, right? Like, how hard is it? You can almost take anything. So take the iPhone for an example. If someone's a hardcore Android person, or early on when the iPhone was there, the BlackBerry people of the world, right? Because that was the big competitor at the time. How hard was it for Apple to get someone to transfer over to start using an iPhone the first time? It was a lot. It took more time. I don't know what marketing spend or anything like that, but it was more of a difficult challenge. So they weren't as profitable on the first iPhone sale. But once you're in that ecosystem, and your Apple Music and your Apple Storage, and you get the new iPhone and your Apple everything else, the lifetime value of dragging you over to be an iPhone customer, now the lifetime value of you as a customer to that business is enormous, right? And that's where all the profit comes in. So that, at least that's the way we see it. And that's what people, I think, discount because they're always worried about new customers. But if you just treat the customers you get properly and you do things to nurture that relationship and your business is structured in such a way that there's repeat sales, that is where you build a real business with strength and a strong foundation that you can build upon.
I'll never forget, because a lot of these principles we picked up from Dan Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the story he shared when he was working with the Proactive guys on the Proactive Acne.
Yeah, I was thinking about them a minute ago too. Yeah.
So the story kind of goes that he was working with them and they would go, you buy that cream, I guess, on a monthly subscription basis.
But you didn't before. I think it was a one-time purchase thing.
No, I think it was always subscription.
Was it always subscription?
Yeah, they tried to go in the malls with one-time purchases with the kiosks and stuff. But I think they've pulled most of that.
Okay.
And they would go... They would not make money until after the 5-month mark. So they were negative. The cost of acquisition, because remember how much they were spending on advertising?
They were hiring celebrities and infomercials.
Justin Bieber was on there, a whole bunch of other celebrities. Yep. So they were paying a crap load to run the advertising. And they were actually losing money for the first 5 months of the subscription. And then after 5 months, they began making money. And that actually was a competitive advantage to their business because no competitor would invest 5 months worth of revenues to acquire a customer. So their negative, the fact that they were able to go negative for so long was actually a business advantage to them. That you just have to be confident enough that at the 5-month mark or whatever you're doing in your business, you're eventually going to pull profit. Otherwise, it's a quick way to bankruptcy.
You know your numbers. If they know that every person's going to stay for 10 months, then they know with every new customer, they double their money. And then it's just simple math. It's like, how many people can you get to stay on for your average term, which is 10 months? So every new customer is really, it doesn't matter if it costs you $1,000 and you're negative for those 5 months, eventually it turns into $2,000. So how often would you be willing to spend $1,000 to get $2,000? The answer is like, everyone's like, yeah, all day long. So then it's just like, how do we replicate this? How do we grow it? Where can we get this message out further?
And I think really what stuck with me with these concepts, like concepts, cost to buy a lead, number of leads to get a customer, the cost per customer, and then the lifetime value of a customer if you try to anticipate some repeat purchases and that kind of thing. Where my eyes got opened is around, I think it was around the year 2000, I wanted to quit my job and I was going to sell ebooks because that was the ebook era. Mm-hmm. And I was going to sell them for like $9 and live on a beach somewhere. And I did this math of like how much money I'd have to spend on advertising back then to get leads. And back then it was using classified ads. Like even though I was selling ebooks, I was going to go use newspaper classified ads. But to get all these leads, and then the money I was going to make at $9, it just wasn't that much money. So it was doing this math that made me finally realize on the lifetime value of a customer that if you sell higher value stuff, you actually need to do less transactions. And if you sell lower priced stuff, you have to do a lot of transactions. And that's what kind of got me thinking about business in a different way.
Yeah. And it's the cost to acquire a customer or a lead in the higher transactional stuff, the higher value stuff. The cost doesn't go up directly in relation to the price that you're selling. So if you're selling a $9 ebook, it might cost you $7 to get that lead. But if you sell a $20 ebook, it might only cost you $9. So then you go from $3 of profit all of a sudden to $11 of profit. It changes the business dynamic right away. And I think that's the type of thing that we're discussing in this point. I think for people getting started out, that's the type of thing you just got to think about a little bit because it's a lot of work to generate these leads and to get these customers. And if you're only getting $3 for every customer, it's going to be it's going to be like a tough kind of a much tougher hill to climb than otherwise if the numbers are bigger.
I think going forward, this is just an economic kind of principle I think that's going to apply going forward is that as the middle class gets eroded, you're going to have to make a choice as a business owner. Do you really cater to low priced options in big volumes or do you go to the super high end? Because I feel like that middle is just getting hollowed out for different economic reasons. So it's something to be aware of if you're starting a business now.
Sure, well, it's tough to compete, right? Walmart's got the bottom. Amazon's got the middle. Let's be honest. Amazon's got a little bit of the bottom, middle. But I don't know. I'd be curious to know the demographic of the people buying at Amazon because I don't know how many people if we were talking about the lower income segment of society, if they're really shopping on Amazon regularly because of shipping costs or the Prime membership and stuff like that, or if there is just more like the visits to Walmart or other stores, other retail stores. I don't really know. And then the high end, yeah, you can structure things in a variety of different ways.
If I had to guess, Amazon's getting everyone across all categories.
Yeah.
But okay, so the next principle,
And I think you're right.
Amazon's just getting everybody. The next principle, Nick, is something the way we think about kind of business. And I want to frame it like this. It's also something else that we picked up from Dan Kennedy, was this idea of these 3 points, that you choose the market you want to sell into. And then when you choose the market that you want to sell into, whether it's going to be cosmetics, pet food, fitness, real estate, whatever it is, you decide how you want to communicate to that market, and that's your messaging. And then once you have your messaging down, you choose the media, and you basically just take your messaging on whatever you're going to share as a way for you to do business, and you put it in all the different media. So once your messaging is dialed in and solid, you can put it on Google, Facebook, you can put it on Instagram, you can put it in magazines, you can put it on TV commercials, radio, podcasts, everywhere. So that was kind of a big principle for me to understand, is that you kind of look at things like choose your market. What is your market going to be? What is your unique message to that market going to be? And then you choose all the media you want to put it in. And the reason that that's really important is because the messaging is really where everything is made. Because if your messaging is right, you're going to acquire customers. And that kind of is what this whole blueprint thing is that we mapped out. It's all around honing in your messaging.
Yeah. The way I always ask, what I ask of people when they come in with an idea, it's like, great, sounds good. How are you going to get people's attention? And it's often that one question is something they've just never thought about before. And the message to market match triangle is a better way to look at it. But even just as the first step of it is just like, how are you going to get their attention? Where are they looking? Where is their attention? The people that you're looking for, where do they put their attention that you're going to be able to get in front of them and get it, right? So, and often that is an afterthought of the business. It's almost like everything else is done. A product's created, the whole business is set up. They have a corporation,
are made, logo is made.
And that hasn't been thought about. And I think that for any idea, that's probably one of the earliest things that people should be thinking about. Because if you don't have an answer to that, it doesn't matter, because that you can have the best business, best product in the world, and if no one knows about it, it means nothing, right? So that's the biggest challenge, and we're never taught to think like that. I don't know. I didn't go to like an Ivy League business school, but from the people that sorry, I shouldn't even say Ivy League, but I didn't go to like to get my MBA or anything like that. And I talked to people that did, and with these conversations, they're like, we never really had that discussion at all. There was some talk about a little bit of branding and that type of stuff, but this type of like implementable strategies on the streets, they're just like, it just really wasn't covered in any way. These types of concepts are just like, I never have thought about it.
Yeah. And all the business books that were thrown my way. I remember when Netsuite was growing like quickly, and the business books that were being shared around there were all like theory. It was putting the right people in the right seats. It was like, get the right people in the right seats on the school bus, so the school bus can, I think that was the good to great. Get the momentum going. And all these concepts like really applied. But
they applied at a later stage.
Yeah, and exactly. How to implement them was always just vague.
Yeah.
So there was truth there. But as a small business just launching before you get to like a medium or big business, you couldn't really use those concepts.
What was interesting to me that I remember you sharing about NetSuite early on, and I guess we can share this, and I guess if we can't, we can edit it. But I think we can, is that they were running a lot of their business and generating customers from Google Ads.
Yeah.
So they were doing online Google Ads,
pay-per-click,
and they were building a very big business that off Google Ads. And we're like, so that's how people, and that was what, 15 to
that was
2005,
2006.
Yeah. So that was a long time ago before they were everywhere. And I'm like, wow, so that's where the attention is. There's this opportunity, and that was early on where there was an opportunity in Google Ads and everything, because there wasn't as much competition.
They had a great strategy, which we kind of looked at and tried to use for ourselves. What they were doing is they would have what was called a white paper in that industry, which was basically a document that would tell somebody who was in charge of inventory in a business or an accountant some way software could help their business. And they put this information into a white paper. And this white paper was a big explanation.
And it was called the white paper to make it more official and formal.
It was a white paper. Yeah. And it would basically be like how accounting in cloud computing. So instead of holding your accounting information locally on a client server model, put it in the cloud or in the internet, and how that would save you so much money. So they put this into a white paper, which is basically like a 5 to 10 page PDF document that is essentially a sales letter. So like it is a white paper
Yeah,
talking about the technical aspect of this.
Yeah, and
But
then
at
it
the
says-
end, it was like, call NetSuite for...
Yeah. By the way, if you think this is a good idea too, then call us because our product actually helps you do this, right?
Yeah. So it was a big, long sales letter. And I'm not making fun of this at all. This was like a brilliant strategy.
No, it was great.
Yeah.
Especially for a software company that back then.
Oh.
I don't know if there were any really doing that type of stuff.
Not many.
Yeah.
It was pretty groundbreaking. And then, so they had this white paper, and then they would go out and buy a pay-per-click ad. I don't know if at that time it was called Google AdWords, but it was a pay-per-click ad like Google AdWords.
No, I think it was like Google PPC. Yeah,
Go
maybe
to,
it was
what was
AdWords.
it? Go to.
Oh, they bought
I was
it.
buying clicks on them. Yeah, Google AdWords bought them.
That. That's right.
Was it
I forgot
go
about that.
to ads or
Yeah.
I forget the name.
Anyways, yeah, something else.
Anyway, so they would buy ads, and the ad would basically say how to save, thousands on your accounting using cloud computing or something. And if you click the ad, it took you to a link to exchange your email address for this white paper. So that's what they did. And then us in the sales force, so I was a sales rep there, then I was a regional sales manager there. We would be sitting in, or you'd come in the morning, and in your software, you'd have your key performance indicators all laid out for you. It was quite good software. And as the sales team, you would see the number of leads that came in for your geographical area or for your vertical. And the sales reps just thought this was kind of brilliant because you would just come in the morning and there'd be a list
of leads.
Because
when we were at Oracle, when I was doing calling from Oracle, it was cold calling.
Yeah, here's the phone book.
Yeah, it's basically that. So like these are people that have already been interested. So it's warm leads.
They're
basically way different scenario.
These were when we were at the beginning of this, when we were talking about how to get a customer to raise their hand and show, or a potential customer to raise their hand and show they're somewhat interested. This is what was happening here. We didn't know if this was a customer yet, but somebody out there in the internet had raised their hand and said, I am somewhat kind of sort of interested in your business. Yeah. And then the sales reps, what we did is we would just call down and kind of qualify some of these leads. And we knew they were somewhat interested because we were now calling to ask them if the information they had downloaded was useful or if they had any questions. So it was a nice sales process too, because you weren't saying, hey, do you want to buy NetSuite?
They're trying to help.
Yeah. It was like, hey, you got this information. Do you have any questions about that thing? Do you want to see a demo? That was a next step in the sales process. Do you want to see a demo of how that software could work for your business? I'll schedule that for you right now. Right. So that was kind of their process. And then it became, as a sales manager, you just got to understand that, like, back to our example, if 50 leads came in, there was one new deal in there. It just became, business became math. You just knew that if you saw 50 new leads, and I'm generalizing, I can't remember how many leads, but if you saw 50 new leads, there was a deal. And then that way you could reverse engineer the entire business, or for your team, you could say, well, if we need 5 new deals this week, this month, whatever it is, and it's taking us 50 to get a new customer, well, we need now 5 times 50 to get 5 new customers. So we need 250 new leads. And I know the marketing department back then at NetSuite, I wasn't communicating with them like this, but I have a feeling they were just running these numbers.
Well, just because of what you saw, how they were doing it.
It was so mathematical. It was beautiful. And they would just kind of crank up the leads as much as they could. And then they would stuff in salespeople into seats to call the leads. And the business just exploded.
And that's how they built it.
They had a good product. It was the right product.
Of course,
for the right
tech
time.
support. I mean, it was a big underground, a lot of capital behind it because it was, it was funded by some people that had made it big in the software company in the world already.
Yeah, Larry Ellison was a billionaire.
Yeah, it is a much bigger, but I'm just curious, but that simple process that you just outlined, that we were talking about some of that stuff earlier, they use that exact simple process on the front end to create a company with a lot more work, a lot more people and everything. But when it went public, do you remember when it went public for?
I feel like it went public for
a couple billion, few billion.
I feel like it went public for like 100 billion, but I guess that's wrong.
No,
anyway,
probably. But it was probably, well, maybe, I don't know.
I should Google this up.
We should.
Yeah. But
yeah, so here,
they took that model to go public on the New York Stock. So yeah, if you Google up just like New York Stock Exchange, NetSuite IPO, that should tell us. But they took this model to grow a company and explode in an area. And it was small. When we started, we were doing deals, Nick. We were doing deals there for there was an 1188 special. It was $1,188. It was like a 1-user license for the smallest piece of software that we sold. And by the time I left 2 years later, we went from like an 1188 still being kind of like an exciting deal to get to we were doing deals like $10,000, $20,000 deals. So instead of $1,000 sale, you were doing it at $10,000 or $20,000 So they grew that in a matter of 2 years. They
Yeah.
went from small purchases to $10,000, $20,000 purchases using this exact strategy. It doesn't matter if we can't find it.
No,
but
I can find the number of shares, like 6.2 million shares, but give me a sec. Hold on.
So then I guess the reason that this is interesting to us, or that caught our attention, and then we heard people like Dan Kennedy talking about similar points.
1.55 billion.
Okay. And I said 100 billion.
Yeah. Off by a little bit. But to the point is those same principles, that simple process on the front end.
It
is
works.
All it took was to get enough customers. The business was more complicated, but it's all it took to get enough customers to be able to grow the business to $1.5 billion in value. It doesn't, and then people, I think
they even did it better in Netsuite because they had recurring revenue built in. So 100%. They could see the annual revenue just rolling.
No, it was great, but I'm just talking just the front end. It doesn't have to be as complicated. And then you can take the same principles like you were just talking about and scale them up and down and morph them for your business in any business, in any business.
I think it was seeing that gave us confidence that because then we heard Dan Kennedy talking about similar stuff and we're like, wait a second, this guy Dan Kennedy's talking about these kinds of principles, getting a lead magnet, which is what the white paper at NetSuite was, and following up, doing all these things, which is what I saw in action to grow $1 billion business. And then we thought, oh, here's this guy teaching small businesses like similar strategies. It gave us this incredible confidence that, oh my gosh, if we just follow this stuff, it's going to work.
It seemed like there was how Tony Robbins, that quote attributed to Tony Robbins, I don't know if he's the first that always says it, is that success leaves clues. It really gave us a roadmap or a blueprint of our own to follow and then expand upon and make our own for what we were trying to do.
Yeah, totally. So now if we reverse engineer some of this stuff, and Nick, we can just give a high level overview of some of these points. But what I wanted to share is that NetSuite white paper that we just discussed, we talk about that as a lead magnet. So we always will ask any business owner, hey, if you want to acquire a lot of interest in your business, instead of going directly for the sale, let's do what these successful businesses have done. Let's try to just identify customers or potential customers who may be interested in us. And then once we know who they are, we can follow up with them. And instead of having a big sales force like NetSuite did, Nick, the way you and I followed up with them was by offering them value. And a lot back then was through email. So our lead magnet when we started a business was a report or a book or an audio or just something, just like NetSuite was doing. We would advertise that. And then once people downloaded that, you and I didn't have the sales force to get salespeople to call and kind of close people into buying something from us. But what we could do is every week we could follow up and share some good information with them. And then at the bottom of that information or that email, we could say, hey, if you're interested in doing business with us, here's our number.
Yeah. What we thought was good information. Some people were probably like, get the heck out of here with this.
Yeah, what
stuff.
is this garbage? Why are you sending me some crappy report in black and white about some properties in Hamilton, Ontario? Anyway, it seemed to work. But that was kind of the next step. And I think that's like the business building process. Nick and I are always looking at if anyone's going to start their own business. That you can depend on referrals for sure. You can depend on your sphere of influence for sure. But if you're really going to grow beyond being a tiny business, you need a systematic way to acquire new leads and to convert them into customers. And for us, it was having something to offer to the market with good messaging. What's the messaging around your lead magnet? It better be more exciting than like a white paper about accounting. Mm-hmm. Something that was like interesting to hear for your target market. And then how are you going to kind of follow up with them? That was like the magical little ingredients for us to get going in business. And then the rest of what I was going to talk about here is just like how you go about doing some of that stuff at a high level.
Yeah, it's more than nitty-gritty stuff, but that's really it. And I think it's from the people, the business owners that we've worked with, it's very often two things that are very, very overlooked. And then once they implement them on a regular basis, they notice a difference. We've seen it time and time again that, it matters. And it's the consistency of that matters. So when we're talking about offering, good information to people and then kind of communicating with them regularly, I look at it as like whenever you're building a relationship with someone, you have to do it in stages. And if you try to go for the home run right away, it doesn't really work, right? So like if you're at a party and you're talking to someone, you're not trying to take them home or whatever the final, I don't know what the final goal is. It's usually it's very often in party with alcohol, it's some sort of sexual things involved there at the end of the night. But if you try to just go for that right away, it doesn't work out. But if you see someone once and you start talking to them, and that conversation is decent, and then you see them again and you continue that conversation, and then you regularly communicate with them via whatever it is, text or on Instagram or phone calls, and you go on a couple
you're
dates.
building a relationship.
You're building that relationship through the consistency of your communication with them. There's a comfort feeling, and that's kind of the more standard process that is more effective than the other process. And it's no different than when you're doing this in a business environment, right? Obviously the tone's different and the delivery is different and that type of stuff, but it's really no different at all. People want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. That has remained constant in from 100 years ago to today in a very digital world to what's going to happen in 50 years from now when we go into virtual worlds and people are doing business in these virtual worlds and with VR glasses on. It's going to be the same thing. They want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And that's what you're trying to do with this process by offering value to people.
And just on that point, I think there's like 1 million software companies that were offering different iterations of what NetSuite did. But they didn't have this process. So many people who get into business think I'm going to build the better mousetrap, and that's instantly going to make me a success. And what we believe strongly and what we're here to tell you is that that's a bunch of bullshit. Usually the people who have the best success have the better system to acquire customers. It's not really who has the best product automatically wins. But most people, when they're trying to get into business, they think they have a new idea for something that is better than everything else out there, which is great. That's part of the equation. But Nick and I will always ask, what is your process to acquire new customers? And if you haven't put thought around that, which are some of the points we're discussing today, then really what do you have? Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing I think that we would try to always kind of impress upon people who are getting started in business.
And it can be very simple. You just need a couple early steps, like what's the front end, and then how are you going to communicate with them a little bit more regularly to build that relationship. And that's it. And don't complicate it any more than that, because if you can put those two things in place, those will start to return results. And then as you grow, you add on other things.
And do it consistently, like you're saying. So we know somebody that we helped out in Ottawa, and we showed them this exact steps. We said, hey, listen, if you're going to do some stuff in this particular business area, run this ad, give away this lead magnet or this white paper or this report.
Well, they licensed a bunch of the stuff that we use. We licensed it to them to use, and we walked them through using it.
We walked them through using it. Give away this report, and then follow up. And they did that for a few months, and the feedback came in that they had generated more income or more revenue. I think it was net income, but then they had working over the previous few years, and that it was like a great success.
Yeah.
But what they did, to your point about consistency,
so they took a vacation.
They just stopped.
Yeah.
And
they started cutting corners. They're like, oh, I don't want to spend the money we were mailing some stuff out. Don't want to spend the money to mail some stuff out. I'm going to take a vacation for a few weeks. I want to pull back a little bit because I'm a little bit too busy. So I want to pull back. And we're like, whoa, hold on. You don't understand this momentum thing, right? So, and then they started really just pulling back, and the results kind of faltered a little bit just from the way they were running the things.
And that's what I would say, that most people who understand some of the concepts that we're sharing, that's where they always kind of fail. They'll run things for like too short of a period of time. They'll run it for 2 weeks, get discouraged that no one's doing business with them, do very little follow-up, and they'll just let it all fail.
Yeah. Or the flip side is that it works very well, but they get distracted by a shiny object syndrome and they move on to something else, and they don't realize, well, what happened? Like, why did this stop working? It's like, well, you're no longer doing exactly what you were doing before. You've changed these 3 things. They're like, oh yeah, why did I change those things? Well, I don't know. And we're guilty of that too, because sometimes we do the same thing over and over again. And look, it gets a little bit mundane sometimes, right? It's a little bit boring. Like no one wants to do the same thing over and over and over. So, but it produces results. So you it's the don't fix what ain't broke type scenario.
Yeah, totally. So then some of the ways to generate the ways to think about generating your own lead magnet or your own thing to give away to get people to identify themselves as a possible customer of yours are this. We have broken out in our little rockstar business building blueprint here that we've kind of shared over the years with different people. Just a few steps. And Nick, we're not going to be able to do a deep dive into all of these, but we can pick and choose. But the first step is what we've discussed, identifying your audience. And the reason that I used to hate this is because I always just wanted to get into business and make some sales. I never wanted to spend time thinking about my audience. But the reason that you need to think about your audience, and this can be identifying some demographic information, things like age, sex, marital status, income, children, the geography they live in, what are their goals, what challenges have they had in this area in the past, what are their values, What are the values of the men that you're after, the women that you're after? Like, how does it kind of all come together? The reason that you're doing this is because when you're crafting your ads for your target market, the more you know about your audience, the more you can put messaging in your advertising that is going to be attractive to your audience. So you just want to get familiar with your audience so that you know how to craft your ads. So step number one is just identifying your market. Who are they? What are the, are there age brackets to your market? Where do they live? What's important to them? What are some of their values? The more information you can kind of scribble together on this piece of paper, the more raw material you have later at a future step to create your ads. So after you've done identifying your audience, the next step we would say is think about where you're going to find your audience. Where does your audience hang out? Do they hang out in the offline world, online world, both? Because we want to determine where we're going to be able to put our advertisements. So we want to start thinking about where do we find our audience?
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be online. So here's what maybe now the COVID world, it matters more, but there's a couple really good examples of this that I was thinking about earlier when I was looking at this. So one is, so a lot of people would be familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk. So when he built the initial wine TV business that he built, for his dad's liquor store, and he went online and was marketing, the way he started that, sure, he was doing YouTube videos, but the way he really started that before the YouTube videos was he's openly speaks about, he was going onto wine forums and responding to every flippin' post that he could respond to, offering value. He didn't have a lead magnet. That was his lead magnet, was these posts in online forums. Yeah. And he was spending no money to do that. So he didn't have to have any paid advertising. Then he moved on to YouTube videos. So then he would post and put a link to
Even
YouTube
then he
video.
wasn't paying because he was creating the videos and putting them on
100%.
YouTube.
So he just created content. Is the point is that became some sort of lead magnet, was his video. So more and more people followed him. In our business here, there's a number of people that have built their own business within Rockstar, and the way they generated clients for their business was they were going out to real estate networking groups, and they were like consistently going to those, either monthly or weekly or whatever. They were going out to those. They were developing relationships, trying to offer value to those things, trying to be someone to be seen there. And that's how they did that. That essentially was their lead magnet, these in-person conversations that they were having before they went and built out some other things. So there's a few of the guys that did that type of thing, right? So there's other ways to do it. And it's about understanding where is the attention, like we spoke about earlier, where are these people giving the attention?
Yeah, where are your potential customers hanging out?
Yeah. And in today's world, it's harder and easier than it was in the past, because it's harder because media and these groups, these specialty interest groups and stuff, they're so much more segmented than they ever were before. Like we all have our own websites. Yeah,
attention's fragmented.
It's like, who goes to, I don't know, CNN or Fox for news anymore? I don't know. There's there's all these kind of like independent, maybe a lot of people do. Maybe that's actually part of the problem, but I won't go there. But there's all these individual media sites you can get kind of really segmented information for what you're looking for. So you have to, so that's the downside, that it's much more segmented. The good side is, if you find those, you're clearly talking to the people that you want to be talking to, versus talking to a big group of people on like a generic site and only a small percentage of them actually care to hear your message. So that's a couple things that, when you're thinking about this, that I would keep in mind. It doesn't have to be pay-per-click. Like we talked about pay-per-click with that. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be Facebook ads. It can be, there's other ways to do it.
Well, one of the ways we did it at the beginning was we used an old concept called an endorsed mailing, where we got one of the professionals, one of the mortgage brokers we knew. We asked if we could send a letter to his database of clients from him advertising or mentioning our lead magnet that we had created, and that would, if he would feel comfortable endorsing that. And I think we wrote up the letter we printed it out on his letterhead. We stuffed it, we addressed them and everything, but we got his permission to do that. And we sent it out to his database that he had a relationship with, and it generated new potential customers for us.
Yeah. And the benefit to him would have been, if any of those customers that came ended up purchasing a property, then they would likely go to him to get the mortgage. And so it created new business from him as well, without him going and asking, saying, hey, like, do you need another mortgage, right? It was a better way for him to offer value to his people as well.
And it's funny because that concept is so old. A lot of people know that concept from using other people's email databases. And this is where I love business building because it's all principle based.
Oh, 100%.
Like the idea that you could go to someone else who has a big email list and ask them to email something out for you. And if you're friendly with this person, if they'll actually do that for you, because many people are protective of their lists, that's like an endorsed mailing through email. We were doing it through old school mail. But this concept of accessing other people's audiences who might have potential customers for you is a really old principle that is usually discounted or people don't think about.
Well, look at YouTubers or social media influencers. There's no difference with what they do. It's the same principle. It's a different media. And this happens all the time. New media comes into space that you might be able to leverage. The principles all stay the same, to your point. But, people look at social media influencers like, well, that's really like a new thing that started 5-7 years ago or something. It's not new at all.
They just built an audience.
They're just communicating in a different way. Like if you were, I'm trying to think someone that's been around for a while. Well, you went to see Copperfield, right? In Vegas a couple of weeks ago. Copperfield, I remember seeing Copperfield at Canada's Wonderland when we were kids. So I don't know, maybe that's 30 to 35, 40 years ago, whatever it is, right? I guess not 40 because I'd be 2. But so maybe it's 30 years ago or something like that. So at the time, with no internet around or anything, if you were a magician and Copperfield had a list of customers and he mailed his list of customers,
I don't know why businesses don't do that.
Yeah.
I'd buy magic tricks from Copperfield for the last 20 years.
That's what I mean. But there's no difference in the social media influencers now. The same thing was being done before. The exact same.
Can you imagine Copperfield had a list of all the people who's attended his events and then he just occasionally twice a year sold out a little catalog that said, hey, you want to buy magic tricks from me? How much more revenue he would make? And no one even talks about that.
How many tickets have Ticketmaster sold? Why doesn't Ticketmaster do other things and reach out to these people afterwards? Or I don't understand. You don't get anything other than trying to sell more concerts.
I don't get it either. The follow-up's just gone. So, but on this point, to wrap this up, if you are...
Sorry, hold on. That's a really important point, this thing, because what we're seeing now more and more, that's why you saw artists after like the Napsters of the world kind of took away the value of the actual, just the music. The artists started getting smart and saying, hey, why are we going through all these middlemen? I'm going to create my own groups of people. And that's where the value started coming in for those. Where they control the audience. Where they control direct to audience. And that's where what we're talking about here is these email lists and these other assets that you have. Audience.
It's why when I kind of chuckle, like I'm a UFC fan. And there's all this thing, I think this weekend, depending on when you're listening, this probably already happened, but I think it's Tyrone Woodley's going to fight Jake Paul.
Oh, yeah.
And Jake Paul's all for increasing fighter salaries. And the reason that most fighters have a difficulty getting salaries increased or their pay increased is because the UFC controls the audience. Now, I'm not saying that fighters shouldn't be paid more. Perhaps they should. I don't know all the inner workings of that business and the costs of that particular business, but it's the UFC that controls the audience. The reason that Jake Paul can earn as much as he's earning and demand what he's demanding on his pay-per-view stuff is that he has a huge audience. Together with his brother, Logan Paul, they have a huge audience. A lot of these UFC fighters that are amazing fighters, they don't have an audience. So although they're skilled at their craft, it goes back to our point about building the better trap. Although you can have a better product, it's the people who control or have the audiences and the relationship with that audience that really have the most value in business.
Mm-hmm. And you're seeing it more and more sports people are seeing it, but for a long time they
didn't see it.
For a long
time.
Some
people still don't get it.
No, in the UFC world, it wasn't like GSP actually did a good job with it. He did a good job with it. The guy that took it to the next level was Conor McGregor. Love him or hate him. He used his persona to get attention, and he leveraged that attention into the whiskey brand.
He built up all his own social media channels 100%. So he can communicate directly with his audience. Yeah, then he sold whiskey.
He changed the game, and he was doing that. Whether you like the guy or hate him.
Oh, as a business person,
he was putting on a show purposely to
get attention.
Yeah. And he wasn't oblivious to that fact for sure.
So this whole concept of building your own audience that you can develop a relationship with to ultimately do business with, you can either buy that audience through like pay-per-click ads or paid advertising. You can either build it yourself through hustle, like you were talking about with Gary Vaynerchuk, or going speaking at different events, like hustling to build people and then recording email addresses and contact information and building up your own audience that way. Or you can access it through these endorsed emails, endorsed mailings, endorsed YouTube videos where you're going on somebody else's channel, someone else's social media, someone else's mailing list and getting exposure that way. So there's multiple ways to build an audience.
Yeah,
but
and there's more ways than that even. But I
those
mean,
are some ways
to
yeah, we're not even getting into kind of constant referral streams.
No, there's yeah.
But those are the big ways. And then after you have identified where your audience is, you want to think of strategies on how to get them to raise their hands and identify themselves so that you can have them enter your email list. You want to have them kind of follow you on social media. You want to have them...
Yeah. And that's what you spoke about with the lead magnet.
That's
just something to offer them.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a bunch of different ways to do a lead magnet that we won't get into right now, but some of the things can be books, reports, free demos, free software. For us, it was, when I was at Netsuite, it was a free demonstration of the software. Yeah. That was kind of the thing.
A lot of contractors use free quotes.
Free quote.
Yeah, like as anything.
So if you can just dress up if you're a contractor and you can just dress up your free quote to have better language, to make it something better than free quote, you'll likely just absolutely destroy the whole industry.
Well, if you do
in a good way, I mean,
if you do a free quote within 6 hours and whatever, blah, blah, you just all of a sudden people want instead of having to wait 3 days for it. It's whatever you want to do.
And then once you have what you're going to do for your free, your lead magnet, it is identifying your ad. So if you're going to do the paid for advertising route, what is your advertisement going to look like? Is it an ad on YouTube? Is it a video ad? Is it a text-based ad? Is it an image ad on Facebook or Instagram? This is where you want to design your ad. And this is where you want to go back to step one when we talked about identifying your audience, because you want to make sure the language or imaging in your ad that is calling out your lead magnet calls out some things that are important to your audience. So this is where you're speaking directly to your audience in your ad. And then after you have your ad created, you want to follow up with these people, basically, Nick, I guess, forever.
Yeah, forever if you're offering them value. If you're nagging them to buy, consistently to ask to do business with you, then you don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at one point we ran the numbers in our particular business, and it's, for most businesses, it's probably true. But
I forget now, but it was a small amount. There were people that came through the funnel and were like instant customers versus... It's probably the 80-20 rule. It's probably 80%
I remember
when
I think when you ran it that one time, it was like 81% of our business came from follow-up.
Yeah, I believe it. I know it was high. I just forget the exact number.
Yeah, so that's where you want to think about how are you going to follow up with your potential customers, and some mechanism to do follow-up, even if it's just once a year that you're doing some follow-up. But the more that you're following up, the better. And to Nick's point, the more value that you're offering in your follow-up, the better it is. And by value, it's just something that your audience is going to see some value in. So it could literally be anything. Like
this podcast, for example. The reason we do this is because we hope some people are listening to our podcast just for real estate updates or economic updates or Bitcoin stuff or whatever. Some people are business people. And for those people, we hope to offer some value that maybe down the road some way, maybe they keep listening to the podcast and maybe there's something that we do down the road that eventually there's some sort of transaction like the business to be done between us. If there is, great, but this is just another route to do it, right? And if there isn't, that's fine too. We're still happy to do it.
So follow-up is like key. I'm just thinking about, we have this email that we send out to our email database, and we've had so many people over the years come into us and say, hey, I got your email the first year. I kind of thought you guys, I didn't know what to think of you guys. And then 5 years later, I was still getting your emails. And now 10 years later, I'm finally ready to do business with you. So we followed up with some of our leads that we generated for 10 years.
Well, more now.
Before they decided to start doing business with us. So follow-up is really important because it's going to convert somebody who found out about you last month. It's also going to convert somebody who found out about you 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's a huge part of the business.
Yeah, and then when you follow up, I know the next step is, you can't just follow up. And that's where some people, when they build this out, and they do a great job building it out, but they don't give people the next step.
Yeah, they're missing this particular
So then
step.
You also, once you offer value to people, it's okay to ask them to buy something from you or to do business with you in some way. So ultimately, and the way our society is structured, you need revenue and you need income to pay for your house and groceries and stuff like that. So everyone needs to make some money, right? So then you got to sell something to be able to make money. Right. Sometimes if you're working at an office job, you might be selling your time. Like other businesses are selling products or some are selling services, but you got to sell something. And you have to then give people the next steps during your follow-up for the opportunity to eventually do some sort of business with you. And that's sometimes what people miss, or they're a little bit shy. They don't want to do it. But when you're offering enough value to people, if you really feel like you're offering value, then you're allowed to ask for something back. Like it's fair. And if those people want to take you up on it, great. But if they don't, it's no problem. Like they don't have to. So, but if without asking, without giving them the next step, it's very, very, very hard for them to take the next step, because very few people will go and like search it out, right? So you have to give the people the next step and make it a clear one right in front of them.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of the steps. Those are the steps that we kind of go through. Nick, I'm trying to think about the resources that we've used over the years to implement some of this stuff. I don't know if ClickFunnels is still around. ClickFunnels is a piece of software that does this really well.
Kartra's a good one now. It's got a thing built in.
What is that
Kartra.
Kartra.
Yeah.
I know there's the higher end one is HubSpot. That is software that implements a lot of what we're talking about. Kind of like out of the box, you just have to plug in what your thinking is. But a lot of
you just need something simple. There's companies like Lead Pages. You just set up a quick website.
That's right. There's Lead Pages.
There's so many different things. You just got to search online to see what kind of works for you.
And I think the key in some of this thinking is that most people that we will meet, I guess we'll break things down like this. We'll say that most people talk about tactics. They'll talk about what are they going to do?
Like these little software programs.
Yeah, they'll say, oh my gosh.
There's 50 different software programs that do it.
Yeah, or you'll stumble into someone who says they've discovered a way to do something on LinkedIn, and they're like, this is the way. And that's a tactic. A strategy is more where you are assembling some things into a bit of a system. So just like we talked about NetSuite, where there's a white paper to download, and then there's a Salesforce to follow up, and there's a demonstration to offer, and there's this process. Now we're talking strategy. And then on top of that is principles. And principles are just things that always work, that you understand why you're doing what you're doing. You're understanding that follow-up is going to generate 80% of your revenue. You understand that the lifetime value of a customer might be enough to allow you to lose money or go negative to acquire a customer. So there's layers to business, whereas most people play or spend all their time with the tactics, and they get excited about the tactics, but they're spinning their wheels. Some percentage of people get to strategy and map out some of the things that we've been discussing here. Very few people really understand the principles. We're still learning this stuff, but spend time trying to understand the principles in business that go beyond strategy and tactic and that are applicable everywhere. So that's kind of how we think about some of this stuff.
Yeah, I got to be honest, it's a hard thing to sometimes
it's taken us over a decade to learn some of this stuff.
No, I just specifically mean the principle. The point you just shared is that sometimes it's a hard thing to be able to stay focused on, because the next shiny object syndrome thing comes out. You're like, oh my god, this is going to be so cool. But sometimes Dennis Ligoy, our old accountant who has passed away, he said to us a number of years ago, he goes, guys, look, I've seen a lot of businesses, and I've seen them come and go. I've seen ones grow into like just huge companies, and I've seen a lot falter, and some stay in the middle. But in his experience, he felt that it was the tortoise that won the race. And there would be these growth spurts in businesses, and then there was a little bit of a plateau for a while, and then another growth spurt. And he goes, that's where I've seen the most sustainable businesses often really kind of, really build things out for the long term. And a lot of that has to do with sticking to the principles and sticking to the core foundations that brought you there, and then just kind of building upon that versus getting distracted and moving to 5 or 10 different things all the time. And it can be hard. It can be hard, especially in today's world where we're blasted with so much stuff. Oh, there's this new technology. And
it always looks like someone else is making more money than you.
Well, we use Infusionsoft, and people go to MailChimp. They're like, oh, you should use MailChimp for this. And there's ConvertKit, and there's, then we talked about ClickFunnels and Kartra and Lead Pages and Unbounce and HubSpot. And like there's all these things, right? You can go to all these things like, oh, maybe this one's better and this technology. Very rarely is using one platform versus another really going to make any significant difference in any results of your business. It's going to be the principles, right? So it's going to be, what are you offering people? Is it good? What's your follow-up afterwards? What's the referral thing like?
What's the cost per customer? What's the lifetime value of customer?
All that stuff is what matters more than anything. And it's not as exciting. And once it's in place, sometimes you just kind of overlook it, but it's the stuff that you just got to drill down to on a regular basis. Maybe it's weekly, daily, depending on where you're at, whatever. You just got to be looking at these numbers, or someone's got to be looking and managing these numbers. And I think it sets you up for the long term, and it gives you a strong foundation to kind of build on. So it's always been, at least for us, it's been the most valuable way to look at things.
And if you're kind of feeling lost listening to some of this stuff, there's no good place to get it. It's not like you can just go to one resource and have all this stuff. It does take time to assemble it. I think what gave us confidence is when we started going to different marketing conferences and we would stumble into business owners who were implementing some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. We had our past history at Oracle, NetSuite to kind of reflect on. So it gave us the confidence like, oh my gosh, this is actually going to work. And we stuck with it.
Yeah.
But it's not like you can go anywhere. Like, where can you go and just say, here's how to build a business? Like, it doesn't really exist.
No, we generally have to piece it together from a number of different places. And some of those places just are no longer available. Unfortunately, we feel fortunate. I'm sure there's other ones that have replaced them to a point, but some of the marketing conferences we went to, so specifically the ones hosted by Dan Kennedy and Bill Glazer, we got a lot of value from, and a lot of people that were at those places and at the different mastermind groups that we were part of, they might have been there before or after us or some with us. They went on to build other businesses in different spaces, all using these principles. Some were dentists, some were digital marketers, some were
car dealerships, chiropractors,
Joe Polish with a carpet cleaning.
Yeah.
There's like the same principles people used to build out all this stuff, and everyone's gone off and done their thing. And so there's all these segmented groups now, and some are larger than others. But around that's where we kind of like, busted our chops initially, and it was really valuable. So if you can find a couple of those spaces that are good for you, led by people, I would suggest just make sure they're led by people that are actually doing it. Because there's a lot of people out there that are like, they teach stuff, but they're not really doing it. Right? It's really interesting. Like I always, it was a Kennedy example, and I always use it, and there's a lot of people that will be like out, or there were prior to COVID, and maybe now they're doing it virtually, but they're speaking to people about building a business on Facebook. But they're out there they get their customers from going around and speaking to people.
To different events in person.
Yeah, they're not getting their customers from Facebook, but they're teaching other people how to get their customers from Facebook. And I'm like, I'm not saying
I remember when you had that realization when you
and I'm like, I'm not saying they can't do it, but
they're not doing it.
Maybe you just got to take it with a grain of salt, because obviously it seems like there might be a bigger source of business from them going around and speaking at all these different events versus actually just implementing what they're teaching you, right? So there's,
or it could work what they were teaching, but they just found an easier path by going into other people's audiences and getting kind of the low-hanging fruit.
You just got to look at it from as best possible from an objective point of view, right? And you got to look at it. My personality, I guess, is wired for that. Like I always try to look at it from a few different personalities to get a little bit of an understanding of where these people are coming from. But there's some really great people out there teaching some really great stuff.
Cool. Anything else? I think that's everything I wanted to share for today.
That's it.
Thanks, Nick. You're amazing.
I think so.
By the way, I'm glad you could hear me.
I'm glad I'm your brother. You're lucky.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Terms show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.